Hi, Corey again on the Freedom Investing Group YouTube channel. I am back and I was thinking that what I might do is read a few articles on some of these. In 2018, when I was just a couple years into this financial independence adventure, I started writing a blog anonymously at the time because no one else knew I was doing this, and I thought the whole thing. I still think the whole thing's crazy, but in a good way. So this first article I'm going to read was the first article I put up on the blog, and it's about kind of me when I was in a little bit of a dark place and the pivots that I took to try to get out of that dark place, and kind of why I started down, what drove me down this whole financial independence road to begin with. So here we go. This is called The Pursuit of Happiness. The whole thing started as an idea. The idea was to find happiness. When my journey started a few years ago, I was not happy. In fact, I was a wreck. But before I get into why I was such a mess, let me back up a bit. Hi, I'm Mr. Dollars and Smiles. Mr. DS for short. I'm currently a 30-something dad, husband, and engineer. In college, I started dating the most beautiful woman I'd ever seen. Luckily, she thought I was okay too. After college, I got a job in a big city as an engineer. That was Los Angeles, side note. And my wife eventually started working as a teacher. We had a great time learning to rock climb together, traveling, and focusing on our careers. We never planned much for the future because we were having such a great time right now. We were extremely busy, but enjoying ourselves. Eventually, the constant hurried nature of our lives, combined with the terrible commutes we dealt with, caught up to us, and we decided to move the heck out of Los Angeles. In 2011, we moved to Boise, Idaho. We bought a house with a white fence. We got a dog. We got another dog. We had a kid. We were living the American dream. Then in 2014, the same year our son was born, work started to get busy. No problem. I was willing to put in the extra time. I'd worked many a big week or two leading up to deadlines before that. Fast forward 2 years. It's now 2016 and work was still crazy busy. This was not a 2-week push to a deadline. It had been that way continuously for almost 2 years. I was regularly working 60 to 80 hours per week. I couldn't remember the last time I had only worked a 40-hour week. 40 hours sounded like a vacation. My 2-year-old son was growing up, and I was missing it. I would typically leave for work before he woke up and get home after he was already in bed. Occasionally, I'd get home in time to say goodnight. On a really good day, I get to play with him for a few minutes and give him his bath before bed. My wife was also working a demanding full-time job, was picking up my slack at home since I was never there. For some reason, she's always supported me, and yet during this time, I could feel the strains on our marriage. My health was suffering as well. I had formerly loved to get outside and challenge myself physically, from climbing to ultra marathons. I loved anything that would get me into the mountains. Yet during this period, I dropped out of all my races and pretty much stopped exercising entirely. Worse, even after putting in all that time and sacrificing everything dear to me for my career, I was failing at work anyway. Projects were completed late. Balls were dropped on things that I'd promised to do. I had so many projects, so many clients, and so many people working for me that I just didn't know how to keep track of it all. Every day felt like 10 to 14 hours of making excuses for why things weren't done and frantically working as fast as I could on the hottest or most late item in my court. I couldn't get caught up to the point where I could work on something before it was due. I was depressed and exhausted. I wanted the world to just pause. I wanted to rest. I used to fantasize about hanging myself in the garage from a bicycle hook using an electrical cord. The scariest thing about these thoughts, when they came, were that they did not elicit a feeling of fear. Instead, they seemed to be pleasant daydreams, akin to imagining myself taking a nap in the shade of an elm tree at the park on a sunny day. I suppose I could have summed all this up nicely by just saying that at the time, I was messed up. And then it happened. The straw that broke the camel's back. I'd been on a real work bender. It seemed I hadn't even seen my son awake in a couple weeks. It was a Sunday around 6 p.m. and I thought, screw this, I'm going home so I can see my son. I got home in time to give him his bath before bed. When I went to take him downstairs for his bath, though, he looked at me as if he didn't even recognize me, freaked out, and started screaming for mom. I was a stranger to my own child. Something had to change. I didn't know what, but I knew I was going to figure it out. As messed up as things seemed to be at the time, I didn't know where to start to change it. Someone recommended I read Rich Dad Poor Dad. I believe that was my friend Jordan Terry at work, by Robert Kiyosaki. The concept of passive income and financial independence went off like a 4th of July firework in my head. I've never wanted anything so bad. The concept was simple. Invest in assets that pay you. Why hadn't I thought of this before? I could use math to find a way out of my job, which I blamed for all my problems at the time. The first problem with this plan was that I had no savings. My wife and I had always spent everything we earned. No matter though, I resolved then and there to get our spending under control and invest in real estate with the goal of moving towards financial independence as quickly as possible. The only problem was I had a lot that I needed to learn, and I felt like I had no time to learn it, which meant that my first goal was to create the space to learn. I read a book called Miracle Morning by Hal Elrod. I started waking up really early. My alarm usually went off at 4 a.m. This created the time that I needed. Every morning I meditated. I recited a list of affirmations that became my daily commitment to the things that were important to me. I visualized what financial independence would be like. I visualized myself taking the steps to get there. I wrote one thing I was grateful for, one thing I accomplished yesterday, and what I would accomplish today in a journal. I ran or lifted weights every day. I read a lot. With some free time now available, it was time to turn my attention to the goal of financial independence. The first step in investing is saving money to invest. Most conventional websites and books seem to recommend a 10% savings rate, so I set that as our initial goal. At the time, this seemed like a huge challenge, but all it really took was packing lunches and making coffee at home instead of buying those from restaurants and coffee shops each day. I stumbled onto Bigger Pockets and started voraciously consuming all of the information they had to offer. The site is like a free encyclopedia for real estate investing. It has everything you could ever want to know. After saving a little money and also figuring out how to use a HELOC to access the equity in our house, we purchased a multifamily residential property, specifically a mobile home park. That first one had 12 units in Garden City. Then one of the guests on the Bigger Pockets podcast started talking about a website called Mr. Money Mustache. This website changed my life. I started at the beginning and read every single post. It was just the right combination of showing the big picture of financial independence, but also explaining the nuts and bolts of exactly how to get there. One of the key takeaways is that saving a huge amount of money does not have to mean suffering. He explains how to be happier at a 50% savings rate than when you were spending it all. In fact, focusing on happiness is actually the means of achieving such a high savings rate. And a savings rate is a high savings rate is the ticket to early financial independence. And there is a link here if you want to just Google it. It's called The Shockingly Simple Math Behind Early Retirement. It's a viral article by Mr. Money Mustache. If you haven't read it, it'll change your life. We started attacking our savings rate with a vengeance and cut our spending way down. Yet the most immediate impediment to my happiness was my supposed hatred for my job. Next goal, improve at my job. Around this time, I read 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey. Habit number 1, being proactive, really resonated with me. I realized that I had to take responsibility for my situation. I had to own the fact that my unhappiness was my own fault, not my job's fault, not my boss's fault, my fault. After all, I had made all the choices that got me into that situation. This felt horrible at first, but then it felt liberating. If I had the power to get myself into the situation, that meant that I also had the power to get myself out. I was no longer a helpless victim. I did some soul searching on my career. Why did I work such long hours? I felt like I had to, but I wasn't chained to my desk. I could go home. Why did I feel I hated my job? Did I hate what I do? No, the content was super fun and interesting. I'm a structural engineer. I got to design buildings, work with cool architects on cool buildings. Did I hate the people I worked with? No. I'm actually lucky to work with a fantastic group of people. Did I hate my boss? No. We sometimes clashed on how to do things, but his intentions were good. He's passionate about what he does, and we're even friends outside of work. What I hated about work wasn't the work itself. It was the other things in my life that I had to give up due to the huge amount of time I spent working. What I hated was the hours. Plain and simple. The reason I worked such long hours wasn't because someone was forcing me to. I realized that I had grown into a role at work that I was not yet competent at. After more than a decade of excelling, I was sucking at my job. Projects were being finished late, balls were getting dropped, and the quality of my work had declined. In a vain attempt to make up for my own incompetence, I was throwing as many hours at the job as I could. However, the reason I was succeeding was not due to a lack of hours on the job. The extra hours weren't helping. The problem was that I sucked. And this realization was great, because this meant that if I could find a way to suck less, then I would work less and be happier. So I started reading a bunch of books on organization, productivity, managing people. I read books and took steps to try to suck less at my job. My performance improved. I was able to manage more people, handle more projects with less time. And then a funny thing happened. Once I no longer felt like I was failing at my job, I actually started to enjoy it. Past, present, and future. Where I've been. I was a miserable workaholic who didn't make time for my family or even myself. Where I am now, at least where I was in 2018, I am pretty darn happy right now. I do my best to make time for my own self-improvement and for my family. My mornings belong to me, my days belong to my work, for now, and my evenings belong to my family. My kids, we have two now, who know who I am. When I come home from work, my older son screams at the top of his lungs, "Dad, Dad, Dad!" and runs up to hug me. My younger son just learned to say the words, "Dada." There is nothing better in the world than coming home to two kids who make it seem like seeing you is as exciting as winning the lottery. Where I'm going. My goal is to reach financial independence while my kids are still young. While I have gotten back into a good place with my career, I have visions of 3-month-long family road trips in the summer and skiing on the weekdays with my kids. I have visions of traveling and going for long trail runs on a Tuesday afternoon. This journey started as an idea. The idea was to find happiness through financial independence. I now realize that I had the steps backwards. Why wait to be happy? By focusing on happiness first, life is already better. And as a bonus, it turns out that by focusing on happiness, I am moving down the road to financial independence too. That's it. Hope you enjoyed it. Cheers.